what comes to your mind when you imagine the idea of a Dark Knight? And how will you translate this idea into gameplay in FF14? In terms of story, I think most people agree that Dark Knight knocked it out of the park with their job story. They literally tap into their own Jungian shadow, right? If you read a bit of Jungian psychology, the shadow archetype is the part of ourselves that we consider undesirable, or the side of ourselves that we are afraid to show to other people, right? Like aggressiveness, for example. But by assimilating the shadow and understanding and accepting that it's part of who you are, you gain so much more than denying it. You can see this happen in the job story, and it's also something that happens in Final Fantasy 16 as well with the main character, right? So in terms of story, Dark Knight, I think, did a really good job. A very interesting take of a class that uses darkness. When I think of a Dark Knight, I think of a class that uses its own life force, right, to empower itself, and getting stronger the closer they are to dying, using their opponent's own life essence to sustain themselves, right? So how do you translate this idea into gameplay? The problem is the Dark Knight is a tank, right? And we can't have the tank use its own HP to do damage, because that's antithetical to the whole rules design. And we also can't let it do more damage the lower health it is, because with the current way Final Fantasy XIV is designed, it just wouldn't work, right? Because you're not going to be able to communicate that with your healers, and it just sounds like a bad time all around for both the tank and the healers to be low enough to do damage but high enough to not die to the next tank buster. So okay, we can't do anything with managing HP, right? So what can we do? Can we at least give it a lot of lifesteal? Because that seems like a pretty easy way to fit it into the Dark Knight's whole theme, right? Oh wait, but Warrior already does that. And Warrior is really good at doing that. So good at doing that that it's literally its identity to heal a lot and be basically unkillable, right? So what is Dark Knight's identity in Dawntrail? Currently, Dark Knight is a magic shield tank. Okay, magic shield tank. The problem is is a magic shield tank with the most uninteresting rotation, 0 sustain, the most brain dead burst phase, no meter management, and the only tank cooldown that can potentially lose you damage if mistimed. And you combine all of this with a bunch of OGCDs that don't seem to have any rhyme or reason, and they do nothing to further the job's fantasy. Besides Living Shadow, I guess. I don't think anyone at Square Enix is a Dark Knight main, you know? Let's do a rotation comparison between the 4 tanks, okay? Let's start with Warrior. Outside of the burst phase, right? What does Warrior do? It's a pretty straightforward rotation, right? You do your 2 into Storm's Eye, you get your Surging Tempest buff, and then you 1-2 into Storm's Path, you build your Beast Gauge until you need to refresh your Surging Tempest again. And then you do this, you combine with some OGCDs like Upheaval, Onslaught, you make sure you don't overcap your Beast Gauge or Infuriate stacks, and then you even release Unga Bunga. Very good animations, and it's a lot of fun. So it's an engaging enough rotation that requires at least a modicum of attention from the player, right? It's very satisfying as well too. I love playing Warrior, fantastic. And it's pretty much unkillable. What about Gunbreaker? Highest APM tank, right? Requires you to pay attention even outside its burst window. You can't just spend your cartridges willy-nilly on like burst strike. You have to make sure you save one for when Gnashing Fang comes up, and you only burst strike when you're about to overcap. And then when the No Mercy window comes, that is when you spend your cartridges as fast as you can. And then you try to fit in all your cool skills like Gnashing Fang and Double Down, Sonic Break, all that, and your cool new Lionheart thingy And all the while you do this, you're weaving continuations, blasting zones, and mitigating if the boss is attacking you. And some people will say that, oh, this is too much and it's too strict, the rotation, which, yeah, maybe it's true, but the point is that Gunbreaker is extremely engaging, and I think for a lot of people, it's very fun to play. Probably the most fun tank to play. What about Paladin? Paladin's rotation is admittedly much simpler than the first two tanks if you compare them, right? You do your 1, 2, 3, you get your free Holy Spirit. If you need to disengage, you can disengage, and you get your Atonement combo, boost mana, and then you can use that for your Confiteor during your burst phase. So there's no gauge tied to damage, right? So you don't need to worry about that. But at the very least, Paladin's burst, you still need to plan it because it's still within the flight or fight window, kind of like No Mercy for Gunbreaker. And there's even like some micro optimization you can do because the last hit of Atonement combo does more damage in Holy Spirit, so you can think like, oh, how am I going to fit this into the fight or flight? The point is, there's still some thought in there, even though it's much more simple than the other two, right? So you have these three, and these are, at least they fill your mental stack, right, while you're doing mechanics. What about Dark Knight? What is Dark Knight's rotation outside of the burst window? You press 1, 2, 3, you fill the blood gauge, and you use Edge of Shadow when your timer dips below 30 seconds, or you're about to overcap a mana. And there's never a risk of losing your Dark Arts buff, because unlike Warrior is tied to a combo ender, right? So if you use the wrong combo ender, you might miss like 2 GCDs of Surging Tempest buff. Or Paladin and Gunbreaker, where it's tied to a 20-second, 15-second window. So that's where the damage buff is. But because Dark Arts is tied to Edge of Shadow and Flood of Shadow, which is an OGCD that you can use pretty much any time, so there is basically no management ever. There's no Dark Arts management, there's no Blood Gauge management either, because Living Shadow, for some reason, they decided players are too stupid to manage that, and so it doesn't cost any gauge anymore. And yeah, there's just nothing to think about outside of the burst. So okay, fine, the burst is the regular rotation is a bit dry, but what does the burst give, right? What can we do during the burst? Does it require any thinking? Is there any window you need to take note of? No, not at all. Because the Dark Knight burst is literally pressing your big Scarlet Delirium button and OGCDs in practically any order you want. And that's the burst. And the only optimization and skill ceiling that the Dark Knight has is storing an Edge of Shadow when you TBN like your main tank before the burst window, and so you have 1 extra Edge of Shadow doing raid buffs. And like, okay, that's kind of cool, but also it technically also doesn't give you a damage boost inherently from the Dark Knight's own kit. Is dependent on the raid buffs, which makes me think like, was this even intentionally designed by the developers, or was that just, like correlation how it just so happened to be designed? I don't know, call me a pessimist, but I don't think, I have my doubts whether it's even intentional. And when it comes to mitigation, the Dark Knight doesn't fare much better either. Like Shadow Visual, I think most Dark Knights agree Shadow Visual is really good, right? It is really good. Some might say it's the weakest of the upgraded skills, but I'm not here to argue that. It's still a really good 2-minute skill. Problem is, all of his other skills kind of suck. Dark Mind, Dark Missionary, we all know they're both completely useless against physical damage, which is niche, right? It makes it more unique. But the problem is, these skills that the Dark Knights have that make it unique, they are almost always a weakness or limitation of Dark Knight rather than a unique advantage it has over other tanks, right? People see Dark Mind and they don't think, oh wow, this would be really good for magic magic dealing bosses. They think, oh, this skill is useless in so many of these bosses moves or tank busters. And yes, we still have TBN, and TBN, as much as other people say it's overshadowed, is still extremely strong, right? But yes, it's not as strong as it once was compared to like Heart of Corundum or Bloodwetting, which are just so strong mitigations. And technically TBN does have only a 15-second cooldown, while like Heart of Corundum and Bloodwetting have a 25 seconds. So theoretically you should be able to use TBN more than those other skills, right? And yeah, that's true, but the problem is that TBN's inherent design requires it to be fully utilized for it to be worth using, right? If you don't break it, you're losing what, 3000 mana or 460 potency. So it makes it much harder to use than any other mitigation. So because you're so much more careful with using it, those 10 extra seconds that you have rarely ever add up to extra uses compared to Bloodwetting or Heart of Corundum. And to add on top of this, for some reason they tied Carve and Spit and Abyssal Drain's cooldowns together, which means that Dark Knights have 0 self-sustain outside of like that 300 potency heal from Soul Eater and Shadow Visual every 2 minutes. It's the worst self-sustain out of all of the tanks by a long shot. Actually insane. Like I understand that they're trying to push it as like the pure shield tank, but it's ridiculous. It's actually just ridiculous. I remember clearly once I was doing an expert roulette as Dark Knight, and the mechanics, you know, the mechanics in Dawn Trail's expert dungeons, they're kind of hard, right? At least compared to the previous expansions. And so like the rest of my party died, and it was just me left to deal with this one boss's like 15% health left, I think. And I thought like, oh, I could do it, you know, like I'm healthy, I know how to do the mechanics. So I did the mechanics, no bounce stacks, I mitted whatever I could mit. But then the lack of heals that Dark Knight has, it began to like rear its ugly head so quickly, and my health was running low, and finally it targeted me with a tank buster, and I had nothing left. All my mids were gone. I didn't even have enough mana for TBN. I was like, okay, that's fine. I still have my inbound. And so I just thought, oh, the boss is like 5%. I'm just gonna inbound and finish him off. And so I inbound. I had not enough blood for Blood Spiller, so I just 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, Heart Slash. You know, Heart Slash, Siphon Strike, Soul Eater. No crit, no direct hit. It's like, oh, I couldn't heal enough and I'm dead. I need to restart the whole boss. I let my team down. I let my party down because my bloody Dark Knight couldn't heal himself from his own inbound. And I remember after that dungeon, I just sat back and I thought, wow, if I was playing any other tank, that wouldn't have happened. Not by a long shot. Even in like the most dire of situations, like Paladin, I could have Clement Seed. Hallowed Ground is like one of the safest inbounds anyway. Even Super Bolide, I could have probably Aurora or even passively healed from the Brutal Shell or something. And you know, if I was Warrior, you don't even say, right? I'm killing that boss. So why am I playing Dark Knight? It doesn't make any sense. The mitigation doesn't compare to the rest of the tanks. The self-sustain is non-existent. The rotation is the most uninteresting thing since like the Summoner rework. And the recent Dawn Trail changes where they merge Blood Weapon and Delirium, like yeah, you get less mana, whatever. The point is I have less buttons to press, right? We don't even get plunge anymore. So I can't press buttons, which you seem to be giving to Gunbreaker. Like you're completely fine with Gunbreaker having it. I guess he did take away Rough Divide, was it? But the point is, Gunbreaker still gets to have so many buttons, but we get so much lesser. I don't get it. We can't press buttons, we can't mid as well as the rest, we can't self-sustain. What is our identity actually? Salted Earth. Why is Salted Earth? Why doesn't Salted Earth give us like a regen? Or like slow the enemy or something? Why does Salt and Darkness exist? Why is Cup and Spin and Abyssal Drain tied to the same cooldown? It just feels like a hodgepodge of OGCDs that they don't know what to do with. And none of it helps strengthen the job's fantasy at all, right? When you play Dark Knight, do you feel like you're playing Dark Knight? If I reskinned it to something else, would it fit perfectly with something else? Because to me at least, it doesn't feel like I'm playing a Dark Knight at all, right? Anyway, like, I thought of some small suggestions, you know, that could help improve the thematic. Because I think, to me, thematic is the most important thing when it comes to playing a job. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or something, but that's the thing that I value the most when it comes to it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll make a second combo ender. Just bring back Power Slash. Am I right? Everyone loves Power Slash. And that combo ender would grant the Dark Arts damage bonus, or it would allow maybe the next Ash of Shadow to grant the Dark Arts damage bonus. So this means that the Dark Knights can alternate between two combo enders, kind of like Warrior, right? That will at least vary up the gameplay, the basic gameplay a bit, add a bit of mental stack for Dark Knights. Next thing I'll do, I'll remove Salt and Darkness because I hate Salt and Darkness. What a stupid ass move. And I'll give some sort of damage reduction or maybe a slow or something on Salted Earth. I think it could use more flavor. I will do something with Shadowbringer as well. Maybe let it restore MP, because in all manner but the name, Shadowbringer is just a big potency skill, which I think is extremely boring. I would change Living Shadow completely. Right now it's just kind of set it and forget it. I don't think anyone really enjoys, no, I don't think anyone really cares about Living Shadow once they press it, right? I think it'd be more interesting if Living Shadow either was kind of like Enshroud from Reaper or like Bunshin from Ninja, where it copied your moves or enhanced your moves. So this would act like a burst window for the Dark Knight, right? It would be something for them to use Scarlet Delirium combo with and put all their strongest skills and OGCDs in that window. And yeah, so it would basically give Dark Knight its own burst window. Along with that, I give Dark Mind some sort of general 10% mitigation as well, kind of like Camouflage from Gunbreaker. If Gunbreaker can have it, I don't see why Dark Knight can't. Something else I do, Oblation is really boring, right? So maybe letting it, like, if you're under the effect of Dark Mind and you Oblation someone, you give them a percentage of Dark Mind or something, you know? You know what Oblation means? Oblation means a gift to God. And I think God deserves a bit more than 10% mitigation, don't you think? So maybe like if you Oblation with Shadow Visual, like you Oblation your teammate with Shadow Visual, they will get a portion of Shadow Visual or something, you know? I mean, just to spice it up a bit. Like all the potencies and stuff can be like fine-tuned by developers. The point is just to make it more interesting, right? Another idea I was thinking is maybe either tie Delirium or Living Shadows usage to like your blood gauge. So the more blood gauge you have, like the longer you last or something. And you give it like a Ikishoten, is that what it's called? Samurai's move, Ikishoten. Where like maybe you trade mana for blood gauge or something, you know? So during your burst, you can ensure you have full blood gauge and your longest burst window or something. That'll be cool. I don't know, I'm just kind of spitting ideas here. Basically, the point is really boring. Dark Knight's really boring right now, and it doesn't really matter if it does the most DPS, because in the end, all these numbers can be changed, right? Whatever they want to be the most DPS will be the most DPS. A class could be literally just 123, 123, which at this point Dark Knight is almost at, right? Just 123, 123, and have the most DPS. That wouldn't, I mean, it would be a good class. It wouldn't be a well-designed class, right? So right now the point is that Dark Knight is not fun to play. And I've been rambling for 20 minutes, holy shit. And yeah, I hope that something changes, and I do not have hope for the 8.0. I've kind of lost all faith with the job design team. If I'm gonna need to wait like 3 more years for a chance for Dark Knight to be good, just don't believe it. If we all, during Shadowbringers, when Dark Knight became like Warrior but worse, we were all saying, oh, they just reworked it, it'll be a good base for them to add on. And then we get Endwalker with like Shadowbringer the skill and Oblation, and that they call it a day. It's kind of like with Summoner. Oh, it was a good in Endwalker, it's like, oh, it's a good base to start on, and you know, to add more later on, and then Dawnchill we get whatever the hell this is with Summoner. I don't know, I kind of lost all faith with the job design team. But yeah, I hope that I see a lot of big content creators really saying their piece. You know, I've been playing Dark Knight since I started playing this game back in Stormblood. I've done so much high level content with this, like Savage, Ultimates and stuff. And I really like the class. It's, no matter how terrible the gameplay is, it still looks really cool, right? Big sword and cool armor, like, how could you say no to that? So yeah, I hope that Square Enix does something, changes something. I'm gonna keep my expectations low, right? I suggest you guys do it too. Okay, bye.